Thomas faced 15 lashes for stealing bread to save his dying sister. The Apache warrior who intervened saw his own lost children in their desperate eyes. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The winter of 1872 had been merciless in the frontier town of Prescott, Arizona Territory. The wooden buildings lining Main Street stood like silent sentinels against the bitter cold, their windows frosted over with ice that sparkled cruelly in the pale morning light. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin grey columns, carrying with it the scent of burning pine and the promise of warmth that 10-year-old Thomas Whitaker would never feel again. He pressed himself against the rough brick wall behind Patterson's general store, his thin coat doing little to shield him from the biting wind that swept down from the mountains. Beside him, huddled beneath a tattered blanket they had found in an abandoned wagon, his 6-year-old sister Emma shivered uncontrollably. Her lips had taken on a bluish tint that made Thomas's chest tighten with fear. "Tommy," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind, "I'm so cold." Thomas pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her small frame. He could feel her ribs through the thin fabric of her dress, could see how her cheeks had hollowed over the past weeks. They had been living on the streets for 3 months now, ever since the fever took their parents within days of each other. Their mother had gone first, burning up with heat in their small cabin on the outskirts of town. Their father followed 2 days later, leaving Thomas with nothing but 2 hungry mouths to feed and a world that had no patience for orphaned children. The town had buried their parents in unmarked graves on the hill behind the church. Reverend Morrison had spoken words that Thomas couldn't remember now, words about God's mercy and eternal rest. But there had been no mercy for Thomas and Emma. The cabin had been claimed by the bank for unpaid debts, and their few possessions had been sold to cover the burial costs. Thomas had tried to find work. He had knocked on every door in Prescott, offering to sweep floors, carry water, muck out stables, anything that would earn them a few coins. But everywhere he went, the answer was the same. The town was struggling. Winter had come early and hard, and no one had extra money for charity, especially not for children who couldn't do a full day's work. "We should go to the orphanage," Mrs. Henderson had told him when he showed up at her boarding house, hat in hand. "It's not right for children to be living on the streets." But Thomas had heard the stories about the orphanage in Phoenix. Children packed into rooms like cattle, fed barely enough to survive, worked until their hands bled. Worse, he'd heard that siblings were often separated, sent to different families across the territory. He would die before he let anyone take Emma from him. So they had stayed on the streets, sleeping in abandoned buildings when they could find them, huddling in alleys when they couldn't. Thomas learned to move through the town like a ghost, invisible to the respectable citizens who hurried past with their eyes averted. He learned which shop owners might leave scraps behind their stores, which wells weren't watched too closely, which churches left their doors unlocked when the cold became unbearable. But it hadn't been enough. Emma was getting weaker every day. The cough that had started a week ago had worsened, a deep rattling sound that shook her small body. Her eyes, once bright and full of mischief, had become dull and distant. This morning, when she had tried to stand, her legs had given out beneath her. That was when Thomas had made his decision. Through the narrow gap between buildings, he could see Patterson's bakery across the street. The warm glow from inside seemed to mock him, and the smell of fresh bread drifting through the morning air made his empty stomach clench painfully. He had been watching for 20 minutes now, studying the patterns. Old Mr. Patterson was behind the counter, serving the early morning customers. His wife was in the back, and their son Jacob was loading the delivery wagon. Thomas's plan was simple. Wait until Jacob left with the wagon, slip in through the back door while Mrs. Patterson was distracted, grab a loaf and run. He knew it was stealing. His mother had raised him better than that, had taught him that honest people didn't take what wasn't theirs. But his mother was gone, and Emma was dying, and Thomas would rather burn in hell than watch his sister starve. "Stay here," he whispered to Emma, tucking the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Don't move. I'll be right back." Emma looked up at him with those trusting eyes, and something inside Thomas broke and mended all at once. He kissed her forehead, tasting salt and fever, and stood. The wagon rattled away down Main Street. Thomas took a deep breath, offered a silent apology to his mother's memory, and started across the street toward Patterson's bakery. He didn't know that Apache trader Navarro was watching from the shadows of the trading post next door, his dark eyes missing nothing. Thomas's heart hammered against his ribs as he crossed Main Street, trying to appear casual despite the trembling in his legs. The morning was still early enough that few people were about, but every face he passed seemed to see right through him, seemed to know what he was planning. He kept his head down, his worn boots kicking up small clouds of frost-covered dust with each step. The back entrance to Patterson's bakery was located in a narrow alley that ran between the bakery and the leather goods shop next door. Thomas had scouted this route 3 times over the past 2 days, memorizing every detail. The door was old and warped, and he knew it didn't latch properly. Mrs. Patterson was always complaining about it to anyone who would listen, saying her husband needed to fix it before winter truly set in. As Thomas slipped into the alley, the smell of fresh bread grew stronger, making his mouth water and his resolve harden. He could hear Mrs. Patterson's voice from inside, singing an old hymn as she worked. The sound made him pause. It reminded him so much of his mother, who had sung the same songs while preparing their meals. He pushed the thought away. There was no room for sentimentality now. Emma needed food. Nothing else mattered. Thomas reached for the door handle, his fingers numb from cold and fear. The metal was icy beneath his touch. He pulled gently, and just as he had hoped, the door gave way with barely a creak. The warmth from inside rushed out to meet him, along with the overwhelming scent of yeast and sugar and everything good in the world. Inside, the bakery's back room was dim and cluttered with flour sacks, wooden crates, and shelves lined with baking supplies. Thomas could see through to the front, where Mrs. Patterson stood with her back to him, arranging loaves in the display case. Her voice carried clearly as she sang, oblivious to the small thief creeping into her domain. The fresh bread sat on cooling racks just 3 feet from where Thomas stood. His vision narrowed until all he could see were those golden brown loaves, still steaming slightly in the cool air. His hands moved of their own accord, reaching out, fingers closing around the warm crust of the nearest loaf. It was heavier than he expected, solid and real in his hands. Thomas clutched it to his chest, feeling its heat through his thin coat. For just a moment he allowed himself to imagine Emma's face when he returned. Imagine her taking that first bite. Imagine the color returning to her cheeks. "Stop right there, boy." The voice cut through his dreams like a knife through butter. Thomas's blood turned to ice. He looked up to find Mr. Patterson standing in the doorway that led to the front of the shop, his weathered face twisted in anger and something else, disappointment maybe, or disgust. "I knew someone was stealing from us," Patterson said, his voice rising. "Mary, come here. We've caught our thief." Thomas's instinct was to run, but his legs wouldn't move. He stood frozen, the bread still clutched against his chest as Mrs. Patterson appeared behind her husband. Her face, which had always been kind when Thomas had seen her in town, hardened into something cold and unforgiving. "It's the Whitaker boy," she said, her voice dripping with scorn. "The orphan. I should have known." "Please," Thomas finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "My sister. She's sick. She needs—" "Your sister needs you to be honest," Mr. Patterson interrupted, striding forward. He grabbed Thomas by the collar, lifting him almost off his feet. The bread fell from Thomas's hands, hitting the floor with a soft thump. "Your sister needs you to be a man, not a thief." Thomas struggled, but Patterson's grip was iron. The baker dragged him through the shop, past the startled customers who had gathered at the commotion, and out into the street. "Marshal Bennett!" Patterson bellowed, his voice echoing off the buildings. "Marshal, we need you!" A crowd began to gather almost immediately. In a small frontier town, any excitement drew people like moths to flame. Thomas saw faces he recognized. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house, old Mr. Cooper from the general store, the Reverend Morrison who had buried his parents. None of them looked sympathetic. Most looked satisfied, as if his capture confirmed something they had always suspected about him. The marshal emerged from his office across the street, adjusting his gun belt as he approached. Marshal Bennett was a tall man with a thick mustache and eyes that never seemed to warm, even when he smiled. "What's all this commotion, Patterson?" he asked. "Caught this boy stealing from my shop," Patterson replied, shaking Thomas slightly for emphasis. Red-handed, he broke in through the back. The marshal's eyes settled on Thomas, cold and assessing. "That true, boy?" Thomas wanted to lie, wanted to deny everything, wanted to explain about Emma and the cold and the hunger that gnawed at them both day and night. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he simply nodded. "Well then," the marshal said, his voice carrying to the growing crowd. "Looks like we've got ourselves a thief." Marshal Bennett's grip on Thomas's shoulder was firm as he marched him toward the town square, the crowd following like a wave of judgment and curiosity. Thomas's mind raced with panic. What would happen to Emma if he was thrown in jail? Who would take care of her? She was still huddled behind the general store, weak and feverish, waiting for him to return with food that he would never bring. "Please," Thomas tried again, twisting to look up at the marshal. "My sister is sick." "She's only 6. She hasn't eaten in 2 days. Quiet, boy," Bennett said, not unkindly, but with the finality of a door slamming shut. "You should have thought about your sister before you became a thief." The town square was a wide-open space in the center of Prescott, dominated by a large oak tree that had stood there longer than anyone could remember. In summer, it provided shade for gatherings and celebrations. In winter, it stood bare and skeletal, a reminder of harsher truths. It was here that justice was administered, where punishments were carried out in full view of the community. Thomas had seen punishments before. He'd watched men tied to the whipping post for fighting, seen others locked in the pillory for public drunkenness. He'd always looked away when the lash fell, had covered his ears against the sounds of pain. Now he was the one being led to that post, and there was nowhere to look away. "String him up!" someone in the crowd called out. Thomas didn't see who. "He's just a boy," another voice protested weakly, but it was drowned out by others. "A thief is a thief, no matter the age. If we let children steal, what kind of town are we? His parents should be ashamed." "His parents are dead, Martha." "Well, that explains it, doesn't it?" The words washed over Thomas like icy water. His vision blurred with tears he refused to shed. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him cry. He thought of Emma, of her trusting eyes, of the promise he'd made to their mother as she lay dying. "Take care of your sister, Thomas. Promise me." He had failed. Marshal Bennett positioned Thomas in front of the old oak tree and began binding his wrists with rough rope. The fibers bit into Thomas's skin, but he barely felt it. All he could think about was Emma, alone and cold, waiting for a brother who would never return. "The punishment for theft in this territory," Bennett announced to the assembled crowd, his voice carrying across the square, "is 15 lashes for an adult. For a child, we reduce it to 5. He paused, letting the words sink in. "But let this be a lesson to all. We are a community of law and order. Stealing will not be tolerated. 5 lashes. Thomas had seen men barely able to walk after 5 lashes. How would he get back to Emma afterward? How would he take care of her when his back was torn open? The marshal reached for the whip that hung on his belt. The crowd pressed closer, some faces eager, others troubled, all of them watching. Thomas closed his eyes and tried to think of something good. His mother's smile, his father's laugh, Emma's little hand in his. "Wait!" The voice was deep and carried an accent that made it stand out among the frontier dialect of the townspeople. The crowd stirred, turning to see who had spoken. Thomas opened his eyes and saw a tall man pushing through the gathered citizens. He was Apache. That much was clear from his features and his dress, a mixture of traditional leather and traded cloth that marked him as one of the peaceful traders who occasionally came to town. His hair was long and black, streaked with grey, and his face was weathered like old leather, but it was his eyes that caught Thomas, dark and deep, filled with an ancient sadness that somehow made them kind. The man, Navarro, Thomas would later learn, walked with the confidence of someone who had faced far worse than disapproving stares. He had been in town for 3 days, trading furs and turquoise for supplies and tools. The townspeople tolerated his presence because his goods were valuable and his manner peaceful, but they never truly welcomed him. Now, as he approached the oak tree, the crowd parted reluctantly before him. "This boy," Navarro said in careful English, each word chosen with precision, "why you punish?" Marshal Bennett's jaw tightened. "This doesn't concern you, Navarro. This is town business." "I ask why," Navarro repeated, his tone unchanged. "What crime?" "He stole bread from my bakery," Mr. Patterson called from the crowd. "Broke in through the back door like a common criminal." Navarro's eyes moved from the baker to Thomas, studying the boy's thin frame, the desperate look in his eyes, the way he trembled not from fear, but from cold and hunger. Navarro looked at the boy tied to the tree, and for a moment he was no longer in Prescott. He was back in the canyon where his people had lived, before the soldiers came, before the winter that took everything. He saw his son, Ashki, running through the scrub grass with the same desperate determination he recognized in this white boy's face. Ashki had been 8 winters old, tall for his age, with his mother's quick smile and fierce loyalty to his younger sister. Navarro remembered how his son would go without food to make sure his sister Nijoni ate first, how he would carry her on his back when she grew tired during the long migrations. The memory came unbidden. The morning Navarro had returned from a hunting trip to find his village in flames. The soldiers had called it a necessary action, retaliation for raids that his peaceful band had nothing to do with. He had found Ashki's body covering his sister's, as if even in death, the boy had tried to shield her from harm. They had been 9 and 6, the same ages as these orphans. "How much?" Navarro asked, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Marshal Bennett frowned. "What?" "The bread. How much does it cost?" Mr. Patterson stepped forward, his face reddening. "That's not the point. The boy is a thief. He needs to learn." "How much?" Navarro repeated, his eyes never leaving Thomas's face. He saw it now, the way the boy kept glancing toward the alley behind the general store. There was someone there, someone waiting for him. 20 cents, Patterson said grudgingly, but it's the principle of the thing. If we let... Navarro reached into the leather pouch at his belt and pulled out a silver coin. $1, he said, holding it up for all to see. Good silver. I pay for bread and for... He paused, searching for the word. Trouble. The crowd stirred. $1 was significant money, especially for a single loaf of bread. Patterson's eyes widened, and Navarro could see the calculation happening behind them. The baker took a step forward, then stopped, glancing at the marshal. It's not about the money, Bennett said. though his tone had lost some of its certainty. The boy broke the law. There has to be consequences. Yes, Navarro agreed. Consequence is, I pay. More than bread worth. This is justice, no? That's not how our law works, the Reverend Morrison interjected, stepping forward from the crowd. The boy committed a crime. He must face punishment so that he learns right from wrong. Navarro turned to face the Reverend, and something in his expression made the holy man take a step back. Your law, Navarro said slowly. Say it good to beat hungry child. Your God say this? The Reverend's face flushed, but he held his ground. God's mercy must be tempered with justice. Spare the rod and spoil the child. The good book is clear on... I know good book, Navarro interrupted quietly. I know story of man who steal bread for family. Your Jesus, he no punish that man. He say, if you hungry, I feed you. If you cold, I clothe you. The Apache's English was halting, but his meaning was crystal clear. This boy steal for sister. This is love, not crime. The silence that followed was heavy with discomfort. Several people in the crowd shifted uneasily. Mrs. Henderson, who had earlier suggested the orphanage, looked at the ground. Navarro pulled out his pouch again. This time, he extracted not coins, but something far more valuable. 3 prime beaver pelts, rich and dark, worth at least $5 each in any trading post from here to Santa Fe. He laid them carefully at Patterson's feet. For bread, he said, and for boys' freedom. Then he looked at Marshal Bennett. I take children. Give them home, no more stealing. This settled debt, yes? Bennett looked at the pelts, then at Thomas, then at the crowd. Public sentiment was shifting. Navarro could see it in their faces. Some still looked angry, but others were beginning to look uncomfortable with the spectacle of a child tied to a whipping post. The marshal was a practical man, and he could read a crowd as well as anyone. Where's the sister? Bennett asked suddenly. Thomas's eyes went wide with fear. Navarro watched the boy struggle against his bonds, saw the terror that came not from concern for himself, but for another. Behind store, Thomas choked out. Please, she's sick. She needs... Before he could finish, Navarro was already moving toward the alley, his long strides eating up the distance. Navarro found her exactly where Thomas's desperate glances had indicated. Behind Patterson's general store, wedged between 2 wooden crates and nearly invisible beneath a threadbare blanket, was the smallest child he had ever seen still breathing. Her lips were blue, her skin pale as winter snow, and when he knelt beside her, he could hear the terrible rattling in her chest with each shallow breath. Emma, he said softly, using the name he'd heard Thomas cry out. The girl's eyes fluttered open, fever-bright and unfocused. She looked at him without fear. Perhaps she was too weak for fear, or perhaps in her delirium she saw someone else. Her cracked lips moved, forming words too quiet to hear. Navarro removed his heavy fur-lined coat and wrapped it around her tiny frame. She weighed nothing, less than a newborn fawn. He gathered her into his arms as carefully as he would handle the most precious thing in the world, because that's what she was, to her brother, to whatever gods watched over children, to the part of Navarro's heart that had never stopped mourning. When he carried her back into the square, the crowd's mood shifted completely. Whatever righteous anger they'd held onto evaporated at the sight of the tiny girl wrapped in furs, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. Even Patterson's face softened, and Mrs. Henderson let out a small sob. Dear God, Reverend Morrison whispered. How long has she been like this? Days, Thomas said from where he remained tied to the tree, tears streaming down his face now with no attempt to hide them. She's been getting worse. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't... His voice broke. Marshal Bennett looked at the boy, then at the girl in Navarro's arms, then at the beaver pelt still lying on the ground. He untied Thomas's wrists with quick, efficient movements. Go to your sister, he said gruffly. Thomas stumbled forward and fell to his knees beside Navarro. He reached out to touch Emma's face with trembling fingers. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I tried." "You did good," Navarro said, shifting so Thomas could be closer to his sister. "You protect her. This is what brothers do." "She needs a doctor," Mrs. Henderson said, pushing through the crowd. She was a widow who ran the boarding house, known for her stern manner, but also for her practical kindness. "Dr. Sullivan's office is just down the street. Someone fetch him quickly." Two men ran off immediately. Navarro remained kneeling with Emma in his arms, letting Thomas hold her small hand. He could feel the heat radiating from her body, the fever consuming her from within. He had seen this before in his own daughter, lung sickness worsened by cold and hunger and hopelessness. "The children need more than a doctor," Navarro said, looking up at the assembled townspeople. "They need home, food, warmth." He paused, making sure everyone was listening. "I take them. Both. I have camp, 3 days north, good hunting, clean water. My sister's daughter, she lost husband last year. She have no children. She teach girl." He looked down at Emma's pale face. "She remember what it is to be mother. You can't just take white children." Someone in the crowd objected. "It's not proper." "What's not proper?" Mrs. Henderson said sharply, "is leaving children to die on our streets while we all walk by with our eyes averted. Shame on us. Shame on all of us." The crowd murmured, some in agreement, others in continued protest. Marshal Bennett held up his hand for silence. "The boy gets a say in this," he declared. "Thomas, this man is offering you and your sister a home. Do you understand what that means? You'd be living with his people, in their way. It wouldn't be like the life you knew with your parents." Thomas looked at Emma's shallow breathing, at the kindness in Navarro's weathered face, at the townspeople who had watched them suffer for months without lifting a hand to help. The choice, when he finally spoke, was no choice at all. "Will she be warm?" he asked, his voice small but steady. "Will she have food?" "Yes," Navarro promised. "Always. Then I'll go." Dr. Sullivan arrived with his black medical bag, his grey hair disheveled from running. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles and hands that never stopped moving. He examined Emma right there in the square, his face growing graver with each passing moment. "Pneumonia," he said finally, looking at Navarro and Thomas. "Advanced. She needs constant warmth, medicine and nourishment, even then." He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood what he wasn't saying. "I have medicine," Navarro said. "My people know plants, know how to heal lung sickness." Dr. Sullivan's expression was skeptical, but not dismissive. He'd been on the frontier long enough to know that native remedies sometimes worked where his own failed. "She'll need both then. Western medicine and whatever knowledge your people have, I'll give you what I can spare." He disappeared into his office and returned with a small bottle of dark liquid and a tin of salve. "Willow bark extract for the fever. This salve for her chest. Rub it on morning and night and keep her warm. Above all else, keep her warm." Navarro accepted the medicine with a solemn nod. "I pay—" "No," Dr. Sullivan said firmly. "Consider it my contribution to their care. I've got enough on my conscience without adding these children to it." He glanced at the townspeople, and several looked away in shame. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward again, this time with practical purpose. "These children need proper clothes for travel and blankets, food for the journey." She looked around at the crowd. "Well, are we going to send them off with nothing?" It was remarkable how quickly guilt could transform into action. Within an hour, Thomas and Emma had more than they'd possessed in months. Warm coats appeared, thick wool blankets, leather boots that were only slightly too large. Mrs. Patterson brought bread and dried meat, her eyes red from crying. Mr. Cooper donated a small tent and camping supplies. Even Marshal Bennett contributed, quietly pressing a small leather purse into Navarro's hand. For emergencies, he said gruffly. There's $20 in there. See that the children are cared for. Thomas watched it all with a strange numbness. Everything was happening so fast. Just this morning, he'd been a desperate thief facing a whipping. Now he was leaving Prescott forever, heading north with an Apache trader he'd never spoken to before today. He looked around the square at the buildings he'd known all his life. The church where his mother had taken him every Sunday. The school where he'd learned to read before their world fell apart. The boarding house where his father had once worked as a carpenter. Everything familiar was about to disappear. "You have doubts," Navarro said quietly, appearing beside him. Emma was resting in Dr. Sullivan's office, warmed by the stove and drifting in and out of fevered sleep. Thomas didn't deny it. "I don't know anything about your people, your ways." "You know most important thing," Navarro replied. "You know how to love your sister, how to sacrifice for family. This is same in all peoples." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My people, we have saying, it is not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves. You already conquer fear today. You choose sister's life over your own comfort. This make you strong." "I was scared," Thomas admitted in a whisper. "Good. Fear keep you alive, but love make life worth living." Navarro placed a weathered hand on Thomas's shoulder. "I tell you something, I have children once. Son your age, daughter like Emma. His voice caught. "They gone now. 10 winters past. When I see you today, see how you protect sister, I see my Ashki. He died protecting his sister too." Thomas looked up at the old warrior's face and saw tears glistening in his eyes. In that moment, something shifted in his understanding. Navarro wasn't taking them out of pity or obligation. He was trying to save them because he couldn't save his own children. "I'm sorry," Thomas said softly, "about your kids." "Me too." Navarro squeezed his shoulder. "But maybe their spirits send me to town this day. Send me to save 2 children I could not save before. This is why I believe in what your people call fate." They left Prescott at dawn the next morning. Emma was bundled in blankets and secured in a travois that Navarro had fashioned overnight, a simple but effective carrier made of lodge poles and leather straps that his horse could pull behind. Thomas rode behind Navarro on the same horse, clutching the supplies they'd been given and stealing glances back at the only home he'd ever known. The town looked different in the early morning light, softer somehow, less harsh than it had seemed during their months on the streets. A few people had gathered to see them off: Mrs. Henderson, Dr. Sullivan, even Marshal Bennett. They stood in awkward silence, perhaps recognizing too late that they should have done more, done better. "You take care of each other," Mrs. Henderson called out as they began to move. Her voice cracked. "Write if you can. Let us know you're safe." Thomas nodded, not trusting his voice. He knew he would never write. There was nothing left for him in Prescott except memories of loss and the bitter taste of being invisible. The journey north took them through terrain that Thomas had never seen before. They followed old trading paths that wound through pine forests and across high desert plains where the air was so thin it hurt to breathe. Navarro set a steady pace, stopping frequently to check on Emma and to let Thomas rest. On the first night, they made camp in a sheltered canyon. Navarro built a fire with practiced efficiency, the flames catching quickly from the dried sage and juniper wood he gathered. Thomas watched, fascinated by the economy of his movements. Nothing wasted, everything purposeful. "You watch good," Navarro said, noticing his attention. "This important." "Fire is life in winter. You learn to build, yes?" Thomas nodded eagerly. His father had taught him some things about camping, but Navarro's knowledge was different, deeper. The Apache showed him how to arrange the stones to reflect heat, how to position the fire so the smoke would rise without choking them, how to bank it for the night so it would last until morning. "Fire like friendship," Navarro said as they worked. Start small, feed careful. Too much too fast, it burn out. Not enough, it die, but tend it right. He smiled slightly. It keep you warm long time. Emma stirred in her blankets, coughing weakly. Thomas was at her side immediately, helping her sit up, supporting her while the fit passed. When she opened her eyes, they were clearer than they'd been in days. "Tommy," she whispered. "I'm here." He smoothed her hair back from her forehead. The fever had broken during the day's travel. "How do you feel?" "Thirsty." Navarro appeared with a canteen and a cup carved from horn. He poured slowly, letting Emma sip at her own pace. "Small drinks," he instructed Thomas. "Too much too fast, she gets sick to stomach." "Where are we?" Emma asked, looking around at the unfamiliar surroundings with wide eyes. "We're going to a new home," Thomas said gently. "This is Navarro. He's taking care of us." Emma studied the Apache man with the fearless curiosity of children. "You're an Indian," she stated matter-of-factly. "Yes," Navarro agreed, not offended by her directness. "I am Apache. You are white children. But we all same inside." He tapped his chest. "All have heart that beat. All need food, water, warmth. All need family." "Are you going to be our family?" Emma asked. The question hung in the cold night air. Thomas held his breath, suddenly realizing how much he wanted the answer to be yes. In just one day, this quiet warrior had shown them more kindness than anyone in Prescott had in 3 months. Navarro was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Yes," he said simply, "if you want. I be family." Emma smiled, the first real smile Thomas had seen from her in weeks, and reached out her small hand. Navarro took it gently in his weathered one. "Then I want that," she said. On the 3rd day, they crested a ridge, and Thomas saw the camp spread out in the valley below. It was smaller than he'd imagined. Perhaps 15 or 20 dwellings made of brush and animal hides, arranged in a loose semicircle near a stream that cut through the landscape like a silver ribbon. Smoke rose from several fires, and Thomas could see figures moving between the structures, going about their daily work. As they descended, people began to notice their approach. Children stopped their games to stare. Women paused in their tasks. Men emerged from their lodges, hands resting casually near weapons that Thomas hoped would remain unused. The attention made him acutely aware of how different he and Emma looked. Pale skin, light hair, wearing clothes that marked them as outsiders. "They're watching us," Thomas whispered to Navarro. "Yes. They wonder why I bring white children." Navarro's voice was calm. "They remember soldiers. Remember broken promises, remember children who never come home." He glanced back at Thomas. "You show respect. You show you want to learn. They see you as I see you, as children who need family." A woman emerged from the largest dwelling, and Thomas knew immediately that this must be Navarro's niece. She was younger than Thomas had expected, perhaps in her mid-20s, with long black hair braided with strips of red cloth. Her face was beautiful but marked by grief. Thomas recognized it because he'd seen the same expression in the mirror after his parents died. Navarro dismounted and spoke to her in their language, gesturing toward the children. Thomas caught his name and Emma's, but little else. The woman listened intently, her dark eyes moving from Navarro to the children and back again. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she approached the travois where Emma lay, still weak but more alert than she'd been in days. The woman knelt beside it, studying Emma's pale face with an expression Thomas couldn't read. She reached out slowly and touched Emma's hair, letting the blonde strands slip through her fingers like silk. "Ishtiane," she said softly, then switched to halting English. "Little light one." Emma, showing no fear, reached up and touched the woman's braid in return. Pretty, she said simply. The woman's face transformed. The grief didn't disappear, but something else joined it, a tentative hope. She looked up at Navarro and spoke rapidly in Apache. He responded, and Thomas watched as an entire conversation played out in a language he didn't understand but could somehow feel. Finally, the woman stood and turned to Thomas. "I am Desba," she said in careful English. "Navarro is my uncle, my husband." She paused, searching for words. He walked with ancestors now. 1 year passed. She placed a hand over her heart. "I have empty place here." "Maybe." She looked at Emma, then at Thomas. "Maybe you fill it. Maybe I fill yours too." "We'd like that," Thomas said, his voice catching. "Ma'am." Over the following days, Thomas and Emma began to learn what it meant to be part of an Apache family. Desba was patient, teaching them words in her language, showing them how things were done. "Shima," she would say, pointing to herself. "Mother." Then pointing to them, "Shie, my son. Shie, my daughter." The camp's initial wariness gradually softened. An old woman named Gu Yin took particular interest in Emma, teaching her to grind seeds and identify useful plants. A young boy named Chato, close to Thomas's age, became his shadow, teaching him to track animals and move quietly through the forest. Thomas learned that respect was earned through action, not words. When he helped gather firewood without being asked, heads nodded in approval. When he defended Chato from older boys' teasing, he gained allies. When he sat patiently while the elders spoke, listening even though he couldn't understand, he gained something more valuable: acceptance. 6 months had passed since Navarro brought the children north. Emma had grown strong, her cheeks full and rosy, her laughter a common sound in the camp. She spoke Apache fluently now, often better than Thomas, and could identify healing plants by touch alone. Desba had taught her to weave baskets and tan hides, and the old women treated her like a granddaughter returned from a long journey. Thomas had changed too. His shoulders had broadened from hard work, and his skin had bronzed from days spent learning to hunt with Chato and the other young men. He wore his hair longer now, dressed in buckskin pants and moccasins that Desba had made. Most importantly, he had learned to see the world through different eyes, to read the stories written in tracks, to understand the language of wind and water, to know that home wasn't a place, but the people who loved you. It was late spring when the soldiers came. Thomas was helping Chato repair fishing traps by the stream when they heard the warning cry from the camp's lookouts. The sound was distinct. 3 sharp calls that meant danger approaching. Both boys dropped their work and ran. The camp was already mobilizing when they arrived. Women were gathering children, moving them toward the hidden cave system in the cliffs behind the camp. Men were emerging with weapons: bows, rifles, knives. Navarro stood at the camp center, his face grave, speaking rapidly to the other warriors. "What's happening?" Thomas asked Desba as she hurried past with Emma in her arms. "Soldiers," she said tersely. "Someone told them about white children here. They come to rescue you." Thomas's blood ran cold. He looked around at the people who had become his family, at the life he had built here, and knew with absolute certainty that he would rather die than go back. "Where do you need me?" he asked. Desba stopped, searching his face. Whatever she saw there made her nod once, sharply. "Take Emma to the caves. Stay with the women and children. Protect them if soldiers get through." Thomas found Emma already clutching the medicine pouch Guyan had given her, tears streaming down her face. "They're going to take us away," she sobbed. "No," Thomas said firmly, kneeling to meet her eyes. "No one is taking us anywhere. This is our home. These are our people, remember? People." Emma nodded, wiping her tears. Thomas took her hand and joined the stream of women and children heading toward the cliffs. But as they climbed the hidden path, he looked back and saw Navarro standing alone between the camp and the approaching soldiers, one old warrior preparing to face a dozen armed men. Thomas couldn't do it, couldn't hide while the man who had saved them risked everything. He pressed Emma's hand into Guyan's. "Keep her safe," he said, then turned and ran back down the path before anyone could stop him. He reached Navarro just as the soldiers came into view, led by a young lieutenant Thomas didn't recognize. The officer held up a hand, halting his men at a distance. "We're not here for trouble," the lieutenant called out. "We received reports that 2 white children, orphans from Prescott, were taken by Apaches. We're here to return them to civilization." "I wasn't taken," Thomas said, stepping forward to stand beside Navarro. "I chose to come." The lieutenant's eyes widened. "Son, you don't have to be afraid. We're here to help you, to take you somewhere safe." "I am somewhere safe," Thomas replied. His voice didn't waver. "This man saved my life and my sister's life when your civilization left us to starve on the streets. These people fed us, clothed us, taught us, loved us. They're my family now." "You're a child. You don't understand what you're saying." "I understand perfectly." Thomas felt Navarro's hand rest on his shoulder, not holding him back, but standing with him. "I'm not going back. My sister's not going back. We're home." The lieutenant stared at Thomas for a long moment, his expression shifting from certainty to confusion to something that might have been understanding. Behind him, his men shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the rescue mission they'd been promised. "The law says," the lieutenant began. "The law also says orphans should be cared for," a new voice interrupted. Mrs. Henderson emerged from behind the line of soldiers, breathing hard from the climb. Dr. Sullivan was with her, along with Marshal Bennett. "These children were dying on our streets while we all looked the other way. We have no right to judge where they've found love." The lieutenant turned, startled. "Ma'am, these people did what we should have done," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. She walked past the soldiers, past the lieutenant, and stopped before Thomas. Her eyes were wet. "I've thought about you every day since you left. Both of you. I wanted to come see with my own eyes that you were all right." She looked at Navarro. "Thank you for saving them when we failed to." Dr. Sullivan stepped forward as well. "The report we sent to the army mentioned that the children were in good health. I came to verify that for the official record." He looked at Thomas's strong frame, his clear eyes, the confidence in his posture. "I'd say they're thriving." Marshal Bennett removed his hat. "Son, are you certain this is what you want? There's no shame in changing your mind." Thomas looked around at the faces watching from the camp. Desbar standing protectively near the caves, Chateau with an arrow nocked but not drawn, Guyen holding Emma's hand, and Navarro beside him, silent and steady as stone. "I'm certain," Thomas said. "My sister and I died in Prescott. We came back to life here." The lieutenant lowered his hand to his pistol, and every Apache warrior tensed, but he didn't draw. Instead, he unbuckled the belt and let it fall to the ground. "I'm not going to fight children over children," he said quietly, "or start a war because some of us think we know better than others what family should look like." He looked at Navarro. "They stay with you?" "They stay," Navarro confirmed. "Then they stay." The lieutenant turned to his men. "Mount up. We're returning to the fort. The children are—" He paused, choosing his words carefully, "with their family." After the soldiers left, escorted part of the way by Bennett and the others from Prescott, the camp erupted in celebration. There was singing and dancing, and for the first time Thomas danced with them, not perfectly but with his whole heart. That night, sitting by the fire with Emma curled asleep against his side and Desba braiding Emma's hair while she slept, Navarro spoke softly. "You could have gone back," he said. "Had easier life, maybe." "No," Thomas said, watching the flames. "I would have had a different life, not an easier one, not a better one. He looked at the old warrior. You told me once that you saw your son in me, that maybe your children's spirit sent you to save us. Yes, I remember. I think maybe my parents' spirit sent me to you too. Sent me to steal that bread, to be caught, to be standing in that square at the exact moment you were there. Thomas's voice thickened. Because you didn't just save our lives. You taught us what family really means. It's not about blood. It's about who stays when everyone else leaves, who feeds you when you're hungry, who teaches you to be strong. Navarro said nothing, but Thomas saw tears reflecting the firelight on the old warrior's weathered cheeks. Above them, stars wheeled across the sky, the same stars that had watched over them in Prescott, but somehow brighter here. Emma stirred in her sleep, smiled, and whispered a word in Apache that meant home. And Thomas knew with absolute certainty that they had found it.